Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and another Energon Universe discussion video where we're taking a look at Void Rivals number 8 that was released on April 3rd, 2024. This issue sees the first confrontation between Proximus and our heroes, which doesn't go great for Darak and Solila. There's some good stuff to talk about in this issue, but the showdown with Proximus is pretty much the main event, so let's start there. This issue gives us a taste as to why the name of Proximus is uttered with such dread. The cyborg Zertonian is a formidable opponent for Darak and Solila, possessing great physical strength and agility, as well as armor that is impervious to Darak's blaster. Though, interestingly enough, not Solila's spear. I'm curious if his mechanical body is capable of adapting to a variety of circumstances or just very specific ones. As last issue, his armor seemed to be extremely malleable, sort of flowing over his body. Anyway, I'm wondering what the range is for his armor's capability, because we get one example of it in action when we see his feet turn into talons to help him keep his footing during the storm. And then there's his weaponry. His bow seems to fire arrows made out of some sort of energy, and those arrows are either able to track their targets or Proximus is able to control their movement somehow. If it's the latter, that's notably similar to Solila's spear, though it doesn't seem like Proximus's arrows have a physical form that I noticed anyway. I think the similarity is worth drawing attention to because it may simply represent advanced Zertonian weapons given to their warrior classes, or it may connect Proximus and Solila in a more meaningful way, or maybe both. As was the case with issue number 7, issue 8 opens with a flashback, this time delving into Solila's past rather than Darak's, revealing quite a bit of previously unknown information. We learn that she is the sibling of a boy named Pilata, and when they were both children, they were apparently surrendered into the service of the Zertonian military by their mother in exchange for food. This subtly draws on a few things we've seen in previous issues, with hunger seeming to be a fairly widespread problem for the poorer citizens of Zertonia. It also calls to mind how manipulative and nasty the Zertonian government can be in order to get what it wants, and how children seem to be a common means to accomplish those ends. As we saw in issue 6, the Unifiers were betrayed by Ultim, who seemed to be the youngest member of the group. The Zertonian government convinced Ultim to sell out the Unifiers in exchange for finding his mother, who presumably had been separated from her son for quite some time, judging by the dialogue. In any case, these opening pages with Solila and Pilata are pretty interesting, partially because we're finally learning some important details about Solila and her history, and partially because it's setting up the question of what happened to Pilata. The way this unfolds, where the flashback cuts to the present day with Solila saying she just remembered there is someone that Zalak would send into the wasteland after them, is practically begging us to connect the dots here. As for the specifics of that connection, though, things are a little bit more unclear. Could it be something as dramatic as Pilata ultimately becoming Proximus? I don't know, maybe. That's the way I'm leaning right now, because I feel like when I usually see this kind of thing happen in episodic content, where a protagonist suddenly remembers or inexplicably brings up an unknown character from the past, that new character conveniently tends to be connected to the immediate episode or plot at hand. But this could be a fake out or could simply be a different sort of connection. For example, maybe Solila and Pilata were trained by Proximus, or they worked with him on missions at some point. Those scenarios still leave the question of what happened to Pilata, but that could also be the aspect that connects the siblings to Proximus, especially if Pilata is no longer alive, but we just don't have enough information yet. Regardless, this segment at the beginning is pretty cool, starting with a pure black panel before moving on to some extreme close-ups of Pilata and Solila, with only certain features visible as our view pulls back on this page and the next, eventually letting us see more of the two characters. But I really like these two panels that kick off this sequence. I know this isn't the most mind-blowing thing in the world, but there's a lot conveyed here using very little. The line work is minimal, as both characters are shrouded in darkness, with Pilata's gaze tilted slightly upward toward his taller sister, and the tear rolling out of his frightened eye, with the next panel showing only Solila's mouth in a neutral and fairly emotionless expression. It's atmospheric and very effective, and I think it's the stuff we don't see here that makes it work so well. I'm a big fan of stuff like this where there's mostly negative space and just enough line work to convey quite a bit. This entire sequence is a terrific showcase of how capable Dave Felici is of imbuing his work with character and emotion. I think it all peaks with this panel, with the body language and the expressions of the children bringing the script to life in a powerful, effective way. And regardless of what happened to Pilata, I think this sequence explains a lot about Solila's personality, like why she can be so abrasive and humorless at times, but also some clues as to where some of her more compassionate and loyal traits come from. After all, she was abandoned by her mother and trained to be a warrior since childhood, so her seriousness makes sense. But I also got the feeling that she carried a sense of responsibility and duty to look after Pilata, which seems to fit with what we seen so far, where she will occasionally show her softer side, though it is, of course, couched in her cold and somewhat grim demeanor. Also, the implication here that wherever Solila and Pilata are, they're being kept somewhere in the dark, almost as if they're being imprisoned with nothing except their armor and weapons, while they presumably await training, dispatch for a mission, or whatever. Whichever way you slice it, this kind of thing just does not reflect well on Zertonia. Anyway, in the second to last panel, a blinding light is cast upon the children, and the very last panel is absorbed into the gutter, which is a nice use of form and symmetry, but also contrast, something we get a lot of in this comic. The sequence started off with a solid black panel with dialogue and ended with a solid white panel with dialogue, bringing that circle to a close. Another thing to mention is that this is the second issue in the series that doesn't feature any Transformers references whatsoever. That makes 2 in a row so far, and again, the characters and story are strong enough that I didn't really miss those appearances. Not that I'll mind seeing them again, though. As we know, Springer is showing up next issue, and I kind of expected him to make an appearance on the last page of this one, but that didn't happen. I guess we'll see how prominent he is next issue. Hopefully he doesn't just appear on the very last page. The midway point of the wasteland is brought up again in the form of Solila asking what they can expect to find there, but Kirkman really wants it to be a surprise, I guess, because Darak dodges the question, just giving some vague ideas, mentioning supplies and a possible ride to the border, and likening it to an oasis, though that's with a question mark, so who knows. This, along with Darak's line from the previous issue where he says, "If I told you, I swear you wouldn't believe me," even after what we saw on that planetoid where we first met, really makes me think that Springer is going to be there. Although it raises the question, why would he just be chilling in the wasteland for who knows how long? I don't know, maybe it's another character, or maybe it's just Cybertronian tech of some kind. Maybe that makes more sense. I'm not sure. Who knows, but I feel like there's gotta be a connection to Cybertron in some way, based off of Darak's line from last issue. I'm really not sure what to expect, but I'm ready to find out. My one complaint here is that I found the conclusion to the fight with Proximus to be somewhat confusing. I get that it's likely a solar storm that interrupted Proximus, choking out Solila, but the way the handroid is counting down on the previous page and the way it's rendered, I initially thought it was an explosion of some kind, but that admittedly makes less sense when you see the next 2 pages, which definitely seems more like the storm shown in issue number 7. So I don't know, I guess solar storms can be counted on to happen at very precise times? Is that why handroid was counting down? I'm still a little unclear on it, but maybe it'll be answered next time. It is cool that little bits of world building from previous issues are coming back here, like the solar storm and the reference to the intense gravity, both features of the wasteland that were introduced last issue. I mean, I think Solila landing on her own spear after Proximus throws it is a reference to the intense gravity, but maybe I'm wrong. Regardless, I thought this was a good issue, but it epitomizes why Void Rivals can be a tough comic to read on a monthly basis. I've mentioned before that I think this series will be a lot more fulfilling to read in collected editions, and this issue does nothing to change my mind on that. And make no mistake, I'm loving the series. It's just so decompressed that I find I'm always wanting more pages so that I can see what happens next. Could be worse, I suppose. Probably not a bad sign that I want to read more sooner. It's an exercise in patience, that's for sure. Anyway, that's it from me on Void Rivals number 8. keep your eyes peeled for the video on Transformers number 7, because, oh man, is there some stuff to talk about with that one. In the meantime, let me know in the comments what you thought about Void Rivals number 8, and if you have any idea what was going on in that solar storm section, anything you think I might have missed or that would lessen my confusion, by all means, please help me out here. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. It's always appreciated. Hope you got something out of it and that you have a good rest of your day. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.